Welcome back to the ABC Network, iHealth Radio, the iHealth channel, because we're going to talk about some stuff that affects our mental health, but definitely the Sales World channel today. And again, we're talking about business strategies and something that we all do since the beginning of our humble beginnings as kids. We start communicating, and we're going to talk about strategies and key elements to communicate in writing specifically, and how that impacts your mental state. And in an environment in the world of today where really, a lot of stuff is done remotely, as we're doing this show today, businesses have been adopting this particular concept since the pandemic, and even before that it happened. But so let's talk, about that. But I have with me someone who's an expert in this. She is going to take us to this journey and guide us. That's what she does. She's a consultant that does this work for communication and writing skills and strategy. And so without any further ado, I have with me Erin Lebacqz. Did I get it right?
You did. Yep. Great job. Thank you, Hurricane.
All right. So I didn't want my French to get in there, but I did the correct way. So Erin, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to this, and I know in my part of the world, one of my worlds, I do lead, sales teams, and obviously in sales, communication is one of the better tools you can have. But also as a leader myself in a corporate world, and now I have my own stuff, but I do both. I do consulting, all this stuff, but it's really the communication is always happening. And I referred to us starting this as early as we started in some words. We want to communicate somehow, and it gets just worse as we go. And we want to talk also, Erin, about I guess even the source of where we have problems in the communication or the writing skills. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a good place. But before that, I want just to Erin to share with us your background for our audiences, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Hurricane. Hi, everyone. Well, I've been teaching writing my entire adult life, basically. It was not my intention, but I ended up in a situation where I was teaching some things and a little writing, and I noticed, oh my gosh, this is what empowers people, right? When we feel confident about using our voice, it's a huge game changer. So from that moment in my 20s, I thought, this is what I want to do, because I know that I can make a contribution by helping people meet their own goals through writing. So I've been teaching in the university setting, a little bit around the world. And now I've switched to teaching in the workplace. So I'll show up in a corporate client, in a state agency, federal, whatever. They'll bring me in and I'll be the person who leads a workshop or consults with a project, whatever it is that they need, talking about, hey, let's be strategic with the way we speak and write. Because, especially with writing, right, someone is on the other side receiving it, and they can read it however they want, and they can reread it and have their own interpretation. And that's worrisome, right? So we talk about, well, what are the strategic things we can do? Because writing is actually just as interactive as talking. It's just that we don't see that person while we're doing it.
Well, thank you, Erin. Well, so a lot of things there. You've pretty much been teaching in different environments to write in. Now, I want to just pose on that in this particular, piece of the discussion, because I want to go to what do you think about the progression of writing skills in the modern age in the last couple of decades. And the reason I'm asking this, because you probably noticed this, and maybe people are watching and listening right now, you might wonder, like, the skill set today in writing has really gone down. Am I the only one who's observed that, or at least had this feeling, or maybe not? So, Erin, just share with us your views on what has been done and why is it was Shakespearean back in the days, right, and we're far away from that style, right? But it's kind of diluted to a degree. I don't know if it's a generational thing, if it's an education thing system, where we need to pay more attention to it. But it does impact everything else, as you said. One thing is key. When you communicate in writing, there is no visual effect. What you see is what you get. And you're right. Everybody has their own way. As simple as if you put the capital letters instead of, the lowercase letter, people get offended, right? So, a tone can be perceived, even if it's wrong, even if it was a mistake, but that's the thing. But there's got to be some reason why we got to a point where we have this, and how we can get away from it. So that's my first, just introduction, because as a teacher of writing, you
Mhm.
probably are very picky about the styles and communicate and how to present it and how to start the discussion, how to do it correctly and all that. So hit us with all that.
Yeah, well, the truth is, I'm not real picky about particular things about writing. What I'm always saying to people is, what's your reader going to need? It's the reader's pickiness that we need to worry about. And you're right. You can have a reader who's going to be upset if you do a capital letter wrong. On the other hand, you can even have a reader who thinks that using capital letters is too aggressive, right? So either way, I've heard that in some Gen Z groups, just capitalizing the first letter of a sentence and in a text can seem passive aggressive because it's like, hey, why being so showy and so correct, right? So it goes back and forth everywhere, right? And then on the other hand, certainly I have some clients who are very formal. And so it depends. What I see often is it depends on the industry you work in. I might be writing with other teachers and we're really casual. But then I have one client in patent copyright law, and they are very formal about everything. So we do want to care about the particular needs and preferences of our readers. And so as far as language changing, you're right, it's evolved. Some people say devolved. I'm saying no value judgment. It has changed, right? It's grown, expanded, contracted, like everything. And what we're seeing now is people using writing in different ways for different reasons. So I agree, we've gotten briefer. We've certainly gotten less Shakespearean. We do have troubles funding our education system, right? And providing enough help to everybody, which is why I have a YouTube channel where you can go learn for free. But anywho, but I think really another aspect that's evolved in a good way, even while we're seeing, text speak more often and shorter sentences and less kind of perfect, we're seeing a little more attention, though, I think, to tone and interpersonals in the writing, because even texting and emojis, you can convey some interpersonal tone. And I think even though many of us might still respect more long form writing, it's not as usable in the workplace anymore, since not everyone is real thorough with what they read, right? So we're making things really brief because everybody's so busy. And I know in your opening, you were mentioning about mental health, which I think this aligns a lot with, actually. But one of them is just when we write in a really high level way, that's stressful for the reader. And it can even be excluding or alienating to them. So even if we are Shakespearean, or people who listen might be a great writer, maybe you did great in school, even in essays or whatever, we still have to kind of scale it back a little, because it's the reader that we're worried about. And they're experiencing content load almost every day. And that's why we keep things brief for them, so they'll be more likely to answer and follow through with whatever we asked for. Yeah.
Well, thank you. There's a lot there. So a couple of things. I can tell you, I in the industry that I've been working with for, almost 30 years now. Well, a little bit over 30. I lost count, but one thing that we do is, because we're regulated and because we cater to a particular demographic of the senior markets, believe it or not, by regulation, our writing has to be like fourth grade level writing type, so people can actually, read it, simple stuff. So these things are like, people may not know about these regulations sometimes in different areas, but you're right. If you're talking to a patent, and I've gone through a patent process myself, that's lawyers, reviewing lawyers. Everything has to be like super. It's like a contract agreement, and everything has to be there. So it's, and in the corporate world also, it's because I've been in both sides of the game. On the entry point and the senior levels, and either one of them depends where you stand in that particular lineup. Writing, to your hierarchies versus to your subordinates, is can be different. The language has to be different. Your peers can be different, because sometimes you send the wrong tone and it creates like a whole debacle, and now we have animosity going on. So it's very touchy feely. As you said, this is like you are stating things, people can get offended. You're writing things, people can get offended just as equally. And you're right, now there's a lot more sensitivity to the tone. The capital letters for me, they don't matter. To be honest with you, I don't even care. I'm
Yeah.
just more of the cool guy about it. But you're right. Like you start your capitals, and then you have the stuff, and basically that's the beginning of. But that's like the old school what I've learned, right? But like you
Right.
said, sometimes it could be perceived as like, what's up with that? What do you mean? And sometimes it's just literally you just forget and you type and it happens. It's those are the things. Like we have to be very sensitive because again, it affects everybody. It affects relationships. It affects the perception. I mean, if you talk to, let's say, this happened to me in one email, I just wrote some stuff to someone who was on my as a downline, right?
Uh-huh.
And they did not perceive it correctly. They thought I was like condescending to them, and I wasn't.
Right.
But it was just the way I wrote the language. I mean, I was firm, but it wasn't condescending, right? So, but then we basically had to hash it out, and we realized that it was just a misperception. But that misperception could have caused a lot of problems, right? And sometimes you feel it as well. Someone writes something to you, and you're like, "What the hell? What do you mean?"
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and in the corporate world, that's big stuff. I mean, because people
Indeed.
really, you're getting on my turf. You're trying to, show off. You're trying to get me in trouble, throw me on the bus. You get all kind of expressions being, put on the table, and those are the things that we need to be more aware of. Now, ultimately, as you get more, experience in this world of writing and communicating through, emails and memos and things like even policies. When you write policies, that's another one. But really, people have, as you said, I love what you focus on. It's not so much about what I want and how I write it. It's really what you're gonna get from me. And if I say the wrong thing, and by the way, sometimes this true happens to me, happens to almost everybody. You think one thing, and sometimes you write it, but it doesn't really convey exactly what you had in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to review, and so there is a protocol about this. But so, Erin, let's talk about that. What are the protocols? Because I love what you said. You go to these meetings. I mean, from the feds to the state to the corporate world, varies a lot, and you're the one who facilitate these things. How does that experience work for you?
Well, it's really interesting actually, because I get to go in and hear the problems people are having. And, most of us grow up a little bit afraid of writing, or at least we find it nervous making, right? Someone's going to judge us. That's what we were taught in school, that writing is in order to try to prove yourself and get judged, right? And so now we've all grown up with this myth that writing is just to show what we know. And then we end up writing each other emails that go on and on and on, where I'm showing you everything I know, but that's not what we want. So when I go in, it's kind of like what you said, Hurricane, where you're saying, as you write to different people, the language has to be different. We can't write the same way to different people as to others. And we all already know this instinctually, because when you're texting, you change your language when you text a parent or a family member or a boss or a friend, right? And so it's natural for us to adapt to what other people need. And we do it out loud too. I think, though, that when we get into writing a document or an email or something that feels very serious and professional, we get a little stressed because of that training from school. Like, ooh, somebody's going to ding me here. Somebody's going to say I'm not smart because of the way I did this. And so the answer is really, and what we talk about in our classes, is focusing more, like you said, on the reader. And we grow up with self-focus in our writing. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to look dumb. But in reality, if you are not journaling or note-taking, you are not writing for you. There is very little occasion that we ever write something for our own selves. And so it's funny just that we don't happen to know, oops, I should focus on the other person because I already know all this stuff. I don't really need to focus on me as I'm writing. I already have the content in my head. That's why I'm writing it, right? So whole paradigm shift, outlook shift, where we've been like, oh no, don't mess up, Erin. You're going to get in trouble. Now it's like, no, we need to focus outward. Who's going to read this? What are they going to need that day? How much time are they going to have? Are they going to be in a bad mood? Are they going to be on the run? And I better use bullets so they can see my message from afar. Right? Kind of imagine the real of what is up with my reader right now and make our decisions based on what helps them, which is super empowering actually, because I don't know about you, but I used to feel like writing was just sort of like luck. I hope it's good. I don't know. I don't know what order to put my thoughts in. I don't know. I'm just hoping it's good. But when we focus our attention on the recipient who's going to grab that thing and try to use it, Now I know how to make decisions. Now I know what to put first, whatever's most relevant for them. Now I know what tone to use, whatever tone fits the relationship I have with that person. Right. And so it's actually empowering to stop and say, you know what, it doesn't really matter how anybody did in school. If you're in a situation at work and you need to write to someone, you are the one with the knowledge. Stop and think about that person and what would work best for them, just like you would do if you walked into a meeting with them.
Well, Aaron, thank you. I mean, I love what you said about the concept of like, almost dumbing it down for a level where it's a lot easier. It's just the bullet points and right to the point. I think sometimes we overdo things. I think a lot of us make that mistake. I think I've been there, guilty as charged at a point, but you learn over time that that may not be the best way to do this. Actually, what you mentioned is so true, because I had two leaders that I reported to at a point in my life. And one was very meticulous, about like, how you write it and how you place it and all stuff. And the other one was like, I don't need too many things. Just give me what the bullets, point 1, 2, 3, 4, what you want, and what we're going to discuss. That's it. I mean, the emails were that short. I mean, there's like basically, here's the point, what we discussed, boom, 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 and that's it. Is it urgent? Is it not urgent? Literally, you determine what that level of priority on the discussion based on what you wrote on those emails. And it made the whole difference. On the contrary, on the different, leader, same role, we had to really express ourselves differently, because we needed to clear and show that we understand and what we need, and almost expand on the thought, as opposed to just basically, here's the topics, boom, 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 and then we'll have the discussion later. So it changes from one person to the other, and understanding, being in the middle of this, or at least being a recipient of that as the one who is going to make that decision. You can get in trouble, because obviously if that's your boss, you don't want to mess up with your boss in a way, right? And so you have all these things, and it gets intimidating sometimes. And you're right, in some circles, you're worried about how you're being perceived. Right. So I'm going to tell you, I mean, English is my fourth language, literally. So I didn't grow up writing English, and now it was all French originally. And well, Arabic and French, but French was actually my major, like, my main, administrative or like school language. Yeah. And so I learned English as a second language. I went to special school stuff, even as a kid, but I mean, I grew up. But so ultimately, my writing skills would have always, been less, I would say. And that's not true. But over time, you learn that that's not the case, and you learn to be better. Right. I mean, right. I write all my stuff now, but back in the days, I had almost like an intimidation. Like when I write something, I'm always wondering, like, how is it going to be perceived? Is it going to be like, because my English is not the best, tool I have. So it was that kind of like, my God, like you're always thinking 3 times, and it does have a nice effect on you, because your self-esteem gets a little bit, twisted. And all it takes is one person making a comment. Ooh, that actually really hurts. It hits a button, right? So again, I'm giving you my experience, and folks, that are listening and watching right now, if your English, let's say, or by the way, any language for that matter, we're talking about English as a primary, but it could be the other way around in a different country or whatever, and your main language is different, you have the same situation. This applies everywhere, folks. So that's actually been my experience. It's very difficult. And then depends also who you communicate, as you said. You send this something to your compliance officer, it's one thing, because now CMS or like whoever regulatory, department is going to be looking at it, it's very difficult how you do it, how to choose your words, how to choose your style. Now you said you go into these meetings. Can you give us a little bit of a picture of like who can be in these meetings, just to share with our audience, because that's going to vary, right, by I guess client.
It does. Yeah. And that keeps it exciting, So sometimes it'll be a specific team. Like I recently had an entire team in a bank that was all IT. And it was because the CTO was kind of like, I care about communication. They had been worried that the IT engineers had been using language that was too high for everyone else. And it's not, too high in their specific area, right? And it's kind of like, maybe some of these ideas are going to end up going to the board. They're all educated people, but they don't need to spend time fighting through technical terms, right? So people will see a problem and then say, ooh, we want to get these folks writing for our readers. Let's hire her to come in. Other times it'll be a group of leaders. Like very often it'll be a leadership development program or an emerging leaders where, a group of people are kind of like the next set of managers. So they get to go to a year of education, and I do the writing sides of that. And then sometimes it's just an all hands where a company or even like a county or utilities or something will say, we know you all want to be able to email more effectively. So we're going to offer this class with Erin X number of times a year. And then I just that's super fun because you get the whole hierarchy mixed together, which is great because then they all get to hear from each other's struggles in class. And so I have strategies prepared and we practice and we do revisions and we talk. I just kind of want to come back to something you said a minute ago, Hurricane, about your former two bosses. We talk about that very thing in class where your story showed that people have a communication preference. You've got the boss who loves details and feelings. You've got the boss who is a bottom line person, right? That we talk about that stuff in class where I recently had a leadership development program and a guy came in and he's only been a leader for a few weeks. He was super pumped, loved it, and was ready to share with the class that his boss, so like same thing you're thinking about, his boss had said, hey, you new boss, can you just give me a quick update in an email about what your team was dealing with this week or whatever? He thought to himself, kind of like you were saying, okay, am I going to say a lot or a little, right? Is this a boss who likes a lot or a boss who likes a little? Well, he misjudged her. He came to class and he said, I realized later on that she is a bottom line person. And yet I sent her a 6-paragraph email with my update. And we all said, oh my gosh, why do you think you forgot about her communication preferences? And he said, I have been there. He said, well, I was excited and I just kept going. I was proud. I was proud of my team. I was pumped about what I was saying. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I've done that before where I'll send ideas to a work partner, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, Erin, that was a lot of ideas, So like you kind of alluded to earlier, people want shorter conversations written now, right? And so, but it's key to really consider who's going to read this and what are their preferences in terms of level of detail, level of formality, level of directness, all these different ways that we might have different preferences than one another, especially depending on industry cultures we've worked in, regional cultures we've lived in, generational cultures we're a part of. These all impact our communication preferences.
Well, thank you, Erin. And again, you're touching on all these points that I think everyone watching and listening right now must be in somewhere there. Because it doesn't matter if you're listening and watching, you're working somewhere or you're learning you're doing some sort of communication writing, whether for fun. I mean, it could be just sending a communication to a company or anything, or it could be just, communicating with friends. It's the same thing, but it does. But by the way, what you said about a new leader usually has that problem. And I do leadership trainings as well. And again, guilty as charged, when I first started, I mean, I've been leading teams since 1995. And, as a new leader, you get that feeling like you want to like prove your point and you want to do this. And at that time it was just a manager. And I do a big difference between what a manager, a boss and a leader, those are different concepts on their own. But the idea is like when you're new, you want to impress everybody. And you and to your point, like I want to show that I can do. And then at the same time, I want to also highlight all my team and show the success. But really, we did 200% of target. We had, a successful month. The quarterly was the best quarter in the last. And this actually is a practice that eventually, as you go further in the ladder, you will see that, for example, if you get to meet a board, the board doesn't want to hear the whole thing. I mean, they want to hear boom, boom, boom. Like, give me the pitch, right? The quick elevator pitch thing. What's our successes? What we need to do? What you need for us, right? And so these things kind of make a difference in different ways. Now, and by the way, what we're saying, right, what I'm talking about is for everybody to learn. It doesn't matter what stage you're in your career path or in entrepreneur or otherwise. These are things that you can practice and they're going to benefit you one way or the other. So now there's one thing, Erin, attention spans.
Yes.
What do you
Good
say to
point.
that?
Yeah, well, we have to be realists as writers, and we're all writers, like you said, right? Even texting, putting up a post on Teams, whatever, sending an email. We're all writing as a form of communication now. And yet we're doing it in a situation where people are not so into reading, right? So it's kind of a tough situation because attention spans are limited, mainly not because we don't want to care or want to try, but just because we have too many things to think about all the time, and notifications and content all the time, the clutter, right? So yes, attention spans are shrinking. And what we're finding in my classes, even this week, people were kind of confessing, right? We've all done it when they've sent an email to a lot of people and no one has answered or replied with what they wanted. And we realized, well, it was simply too long. And I'm now doing, when I write a message of any kind, not a document, but anything that's going straight to a person, I take things out before I send it. I don't add things. I take things out when I go review. What do they not need right in this moment? I'm taking it out. Because if we send somebody a message with 10 items in it, they're not going to read 10 items. Might as well send 2, and then they'll probably read them. So we also want to use a lot of visual tricks to make our writing scannable, skimmable. Not everyone has time to go through the whole paragraph. So that's why it's helpful to use headings and bullets in any kind of document or message, even just an email. Even I'll do it I'm commenting on someone's chat in Zoom. I had 3 reasons I like this, 1, 2, 3, right? Try to get away from paragraphs and into things that someone can just see. Even we can imagine them reading it on their phone. Oh yeah, look at that. Looks like I have 3 things I have to do later because they showed it in bullets. So anytime you find yourself frustrated, like, how come no one answered? Usually when we look within, we can find, oh yeah, maybe it's because I kind of said a lot. And try sending it again, saying a fraction of what you said previously, and see if you get a better answer. And also spreading out the things you did say with more white space in between, like with headings and bullets.
Well, thank you. Well, the reason I said that is because, like, again, depends who your audience is, right? If someone is really busy and has too many things going on, and you're like sending, they're not going to go through the whole thing. They just want, like, what's the highlight? What's that bullet, right? Actually, I'm one of those folks. I mean, I love you give me 3 bullets, I can actually talk about all of them, and right. It's funny because I'm looking at your wall, your wall. I think that's the book, right? And just looking at it right now, high value writing, right? The real strategies and stuff. That in itself, to me, tells me exactly what the book is about, and we can talk hours for that, right? But it makes a difference, especially, as you said, if you give some visual effect to help guide that discussion, makes a difference.
Right.
So now, Erin, I want to talk about. I mentioned the scenario where I had that email that kind of was conceived or perceived, right? But that actually goes to the discussion of authority versus being firm. Especially as new leaders, there's always that power trip that comes along with that, that little chip. What do you say to folks that are watching and listening if they're in that course of their path right now and they're getting to that level where they're gonna like make some decisions? They can have some folks that report to them or line to them, and how can they potentially be firm without actually really showing that I'm the boss kind of concept, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do we convey that strategically?
Yeah, you can convey that kind of information without feeling like you're being aggressive. So I'll kind of talk here about sort of the desire in that case or others to say something negative or critical, but in a way that maintains trust, right? We've got to, like you said, there's a relationship behind everything that we write. And sometimes people will say, gosh, I don't want to take all that time working on my message. And I'm kind of like, well, do you want to spend an hour later having an argument with the reader? Spend the time on the front end, right? And so what I would do in those cases is you can actually be pretty honest and transparent, even about critical topics, if we're careful with a few specific types of words and phrasings that can put people on the defensive. And one of those is simply the word you. So we can say, I don't like this idea, pretty easily without offending someone if we manage how we use the word you. So for example, I could be like, maybe you turn in a report page to me, you did the appendix, and I'm like, why didn't you put a timeline in your appendix? And you're kind of like, yo, I thought about it. I have reasons. Don't accuse me. I tried, right? And I could have just said, let's add a timeline to this appendix. I don't need to say you and your. I can make it, I call that product over person. Focus the conversation on the product, the outcome, the deliverable, the goal, not the human beings. And we can do that a lot more easily in writing because we have time to tinker with it, right? And so anytime I write something where I'm, disappointed, disagreeing, criticizing, I'll make sure that the literal grammatical focus of my sentences is the topic, not the human. And I used to do this teaching college, so I know that it can help people not feel defensive. I used to be, putting comments on an essay or whatever. If they did a great job on page 3 of providing evidence, I'm writing, you supported your point so well on page 3. But if they didn't, I am not saying you failed to support your point on page 3. No, I'm just writing, page 3 needs more evidence. And typically the person comes into office hours with their essay out and says, you mentioned page 3 needs more evidence. You're right, there's none. Where should I put it? They're ready to work on it, So we want to write in a way that's respect forward by not getting personal and focusing on the shared goal. And so this is one of many ways that leaders can actually use writing as a management tool. We can criticize without demotivating when we're intentional about it.
I love it, and keyword intentional, because you're right. I mean, I use a similar approach whereby there's, by the way, to me, everybody's effort is already gets credits, right?
Yes.
The fact that they did something can't take that away from them. So if they miss something, even though it could be even the core stuff, but what's the big deal? They're gonna go back and fix it. As you said, you don't have to say, well, you didn't do a good job, or you go crazy and you start I just spent 5 hours or 10 hours or 2 nights, over the weekend to try to get this project. By the way, I've had some of those leaderships myself where I had to deal with that, personality where you had someone, no matter what I can figure out which way I have to do it. And a project can take 3 takes, 4 takes before, it's acceptable, right? Yet, again, some leader will be like, okay, I love it. That's it. Good, done. But the idea is how it's conveyed to you. It can make a very, person very happy, and sometimes really demotivated, and sometimes they're willing to quit. And that's, again, we in the workplace, we are saying people leave managers, not, the companies, right? And so if your leader is really condescending, and by the way, I'm not talking about intentional condescending here. They're just doing it because that's what they think. They're just strict, about things. Again, sensitivity training, helps. Training is just like this of communication, skills training that's a big one. I mean, that's usually on every year's appraisal, communication is a key, and you have all these denominators within the communication that you need to meet. I mean, I put that in every year's, future goals, so people can actually see them, the things that they need to always be aware of. So this way they can, get evaluated on them, but also it gives them time to work on. And so, but you're right. I can say, listen, I love what you put. All this stuff is good, and I'd like to see something added, to this. Can we just add another, piece on regarding something else? Basically, I mean, the idea I just introduced that there's something missing, but I just said we added without you missed that thing. Why didn't you? Right? So it's the same thing. It's how you say, not what you say, right? Or I forgot which one goes. But yeah, so intentional communication, intentional. Let's share with us, Erin, your I guess how you feel about the word intentional in everything when it comes to communication.
Right. Well, I think intentionality is really something that we forget about with writing, even though, again, we are typically intentional when we speak. Even when we're, in a heated moment, even if someone is having a disagreement with a significant other, we try to stop and think, okay, how could I phrase this to make this conversation productive? Right. So again, it's like what you were just saying about why, beat the person up for not finishing. Just say, let's finish this instead of why didn't you finish it? Goal oriented. We want to be goal oriented with our writing. The goal being something productive, right? Not to satisfy our ego or our irritation, but to do something productive. And so one of the most powerful tools is just to realize that as we were brought up to write, to get judged, we often developed that self-focus in our writing, but we can actually write with intentional other focus. And in management, it's just huge. I was working with a young woman who was in her second career job in her 20s. And, we're all hearing about different generations and how we're having trouble retaining talent, right? Today's younger generations, they don't want to be treated badly at work. They're going to leave, and they should. They're going to demand to be respected, right? So I'm working with one of these young women. She told me that in her first career job, she immediately got a bad feeling because she started, and once a month, there would be an all hands email from leadership. And for whatever reason, the way it was written, she felt unincluded, uncared for, dismissed. That it was very much self-focused on the leadership. And so the people reading it were she was secretly thinking, I'm going to get out of here when I get a chance. I'm starting to realize I don't matter here, or that's how I feel anyway. Might not even be true, right? But she was already getting in her mind, I'm going to get out of here. Well, fast forward, she started working at a startup actually, and her boss wrote these incredibly inclusive, respectful, engaging emails to the team that were very much about them, other focused. This is a woman in her 20s. She admitted to me that the first day she received one of those, she called her mom and said, Mom, I finally found the right job. I'm so glad I left my first job. And I mean, and it's the first job was a company that I won't say the name, but they're notorious for having a reputation of not caring. And imagine, right, the amount
I think I know what that job is. I'm not even going there.
Let's just say they've made media about it, right? Like movies or whatever. But yeah, imagine the amount of money that company wastes on retention issues, right? And hiring and rehiring. Oh my gosh, people forget that you can try to put in money into hiring practices and into parties and shaping an amazing culture. You turn around and write a dismissive email, it's all for nothing.
Erin, thank you for bringing that point, because we kind of talked about more about like the communication to convey work stuff, but you just turned this into, like, based on the intentional piece, the idea of inclusion and making people feel good about the environment and where they are, because that's very easily perceived. If you are working in an environment where it's always never about everybody, it's always about the few or the top, I guess echelon of the company.
Yeah.
It people are always gonna read through that quickly, and that this is not. They care about profits, not about people. And on the contrary, you want your company to be successful. If you take care of your people, the rest is history. They'll do anything for you. And actually, that's true leadership. And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of people in leadership positions, unfortunately, they're not true leaders. And I'm saying it loud and publicly because I've seen them. They happen to be in those positions for whatever reason. Right. I mean, they might have they have the education, they have some experience to it, but it's that communication is the ability to make your people follow and really respect you and do things because they feel that it's not about you, it's about them.
Right.
Like I tell you, I mean, I don't talk when we are in the business. It's always about we.
Yes,
we need to do this. We need to do that. It's not about I need to do this or I need you to do this. We got to do this together. We got to make it happen. And this is what the picture is going to look like. You're going to give them the perception the reality of things, really, like the vision. Here's where we are. Here's where we're going to be. But you're right. You get an email that is completely like, we're just chopped liver. We're just the labor. And, when you start thinking that way, and by the way, I've been in those shoes too, where I've seen some corporations that have that kind of attitude. And you know what? It's not a place that you want to stay in because that environment is not going to be thriving for you. You're not going to make it happen. And you want to I love what you said. first thing she gets this email, she's excited. Oh my God, this is the place. Because now you look forward to going, to the workplace, what I call it TGIMs. If you have a
Right.
TGIM, you're good, right?
Right.
Not you look for the TGIF, you want to have a TGIM Sunday. Yeah, well, I can't wait until tomorrow because I'm going to be, at the office. I'm going to have fun. And by the way,
Right.
this is for the corporate, but even if you are an entrepreneur, you want to do the same thing because you want your teams and whoever is
Yes.
working with you to really feel great so they can help you build your business to the next level. So thank you,
Hmm.
Erin, for really breaking that down, because I think that's a big piece that's easily um, fixed in a way, right? I mean, you don't have
Yes,
to be,
exactly.
and if not, we have you. We just have to bring you in there.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like, hey, you're writing anyway. It's a free opportunity. You are already going to spend time on it, and it doesn't really cost money other than your wage, your salary, that you're already making in the background. Why not use the moment with intention, right? And that's what I try to help people with my courses and YouTube videos of you can do this in a purposeful manner that you feel confident about and that has reasons and purpose behind your writing choices, and that then you're going to get the business impact and the relationship impact.
Thank you. Now, people have problems. Life happens. We all have them, and in the environment of business, it's very common that people around you are going to have personal stuff,
Yes.
health, personal issues, whatever. There's always something going on in everybody's life, right? Now, if you want to communicate with folks that might have these things happening, what would you recommend, Erin, to people if they want to convey empathy and they want to be like, sensitive, and
Mm-hmm.
still kind of, and supportive? What would you tell people? How can they possibly do it strategically?
Yeah, well, this is going to sound like too small to matter and also too grammary, but it's only one thing and it has a massive impact. I think we don't realize that the verbs, the words that show what we're doing, our actions, those carry tone and sometimes accidentally judgment. So when you talk about people on your team or to or about people who are struggling, check the verbs you use to represent them. For example, if I know one of my direct reports is struggling and, Belinda, right? I'm like, oh, Belinda has this new project. And if I talk about her, Belinda has a project now. Belinda is now doing this project. Belinda is now going to be part of this process. It sounds kind of plain. But what if I say Belinda will now oversee the process? Belinda will now direct the process, supervise, manage, use verbs that give power to other people. We can actually empower people. And this is a huge role as a team lead because you're going to have somebody shy or feeling unincluded or feeling worried about speaking up. Or maybe they've really actually been unincluded, right? And the way you talk about them through the verbs can do a lot. And so even, little things in a meeting where maybe Rebecca spoke up and doesn't normally, right? And you're like, ooh, I want to make sure Rebecca feels good about speaking up, instead of just saying, oh yeah, remember how Rebecca said this thing earlier? Say something like, hey, remember when Rebecca taught us blah, blah? Remember when Rebecca explained or shared her expertise? So it's in the actions that we can talk about each other in a way that empowers. And then sometimes you'll hear groups who've been typically not as empowered by society, whether it's lower ranked people, women, people from certain backgrounds who feel like they haven't been put forward in a particular industry. What we all do is we get together and describe each other with strong verbs to show each other's experience. And we also name drop each other so people don't forget what good stuff we did. So if you're in a meeting and you're the one let's go back to Rebecca, no one's going to remember that she spoke up later on, then it's my job to say, remember earlier when Rebecca shared that one insight? So a couple ways that we're going to bring people in actively on purpose by using their name, using strong verbs, making sure that they're actively included. And these are all things managers can easily do, written or spoken, because you're speaking and writing anyway. We don't need to say like, I would like to hear from each of you. That's very us and them. We can say, let's all share our thoughts, right? And create more of a togetherness feeling that equalizes and reduces the hierarchy and therefore increases trust and intimacy, and belonging on a team.
Well, it's amazing. First of all, I love what you said about it. It's a simple thing, really, that you just
Yeah.
covered. And actually, less is simple, as they say, or less is better, as an expression, and, avoids anything that gets lost in translation. But what you said here is like, at the end of the day, there's no business that is working because of one person. It's always everybody. It's
Mm-hmm.
the team. It's always the team. And you're right. Everybody's different on the team, but one complements the other. And that's what makes a team a team. But you're right. If you always highlight, every time there's an opportunity to highlight someone, highlight them. You're not going to lose anything, folks. As a matter of fact,
Right.
it's only a gain. There's no loss in there. That's the positive way to look at it. Now, obviously, if someone is disruptive and they're completely negative, there's a way to communicate with that, right?
Right.
So I'm not going to give you my piece of it, but Erin, what would you say to someone if there is someone in the group that does that? Because someone right now listening, watching, is like, well, there's always that one that comes out
Yeah.
like, oh my God, we don't want to hear from that person. What would you say to our audiences right now if someone is in the environment in a team like that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're going to have the conversation one-on-one, right? Not with other people around.
Yep.
And I have experience with this, not only from managing in a college, but before that, when I was very young woman and started teaching, it was at a high school, which was not a successful one. And I wanted to teach there to try to provide assistance, for people. And so I had to learn right away, how am I going to be able to tell someone, please don't do that? In a way that's going to let the class continue, right? And that's what managers have to do at work. And typically my advice is to make sure your language is all about things that are observational and observed with evidence versus claims and opinions. And so we don't have to say, you sound self-centered when you do this. That would be an opinion. But we can describe an observation, like I noticed that in the meeting after you said these two things, these three other people never spoke again. And I'm observing this is the impact I'm seeing, which is different than I have an opinion about what you're doing. And let me tell you, because we can then walk into assumptions and people will think, well, that's not why I said it. I said it because last week you told me to speak up more, right? We don't know. So we have to approach it giving the benefit of the doubt at first, but using observational language can help, again, keep the individuals and the personal heat out of it, but still be able to say, this was not effective when you did this.
Thank you. Well, Erin, one thing on emails, right? Especially when you communicate in writing, what would you say to people to avoid? I mean, I personally, try to always avoid like putting names, putting stuff. Also, look who you're sending the emails to, because sometimes you reply to all, and it's disastrous.
Yes, it is.
So what? How do you? What is your advice to when someone is really trying to, I guess, to put an email together for whatever communication is? How do they kind of prepare themselves not to fall into these mistakes?
Well, two things I'll share. One is it's so silly, but read what you wrote aloud in your mind or really aloud in a snarky voice, in an upset, sarcastic, snotty, snarky voice, because you don't know. I might have said something innocent like, hey, I hope you liked the session. If you still need more info, shoot me an email. Well, what if my reader just walked out of a meeting where they had a huge argument? They're in the funky mood. And they read it, whatever I said in the beginning, thanks for coming to our session. If you still need information, and then they're like, what are you calling me an idiot? Because they're in that mood. I never meant that, right? And so we don't know our reader's mood. And so it helps to read with that in mind. But other than mood, I would also say, before you send your email, go in there and judge each thing you've said through this concept. Does my reader need that point now, later, or never? And start stripping out the things that you are saying later or never, and you will find them. I try to be concise all the time. And just 2 weeks ago, I wrote this whole thing to my client And then I did now, later, never analysis on it. I literally took out like 2/3 of the email. And some of it I never ever did tell her because it was just stuff that I thought was important. And I realized it was not important for her. And so we need to orient our message to the person, and we need to make it not super long. And using that now, later, never analysis will help you with both.
I can relate to that. I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, when you write something, first of all, there's always that, like, what we think, what we say in our mind, and what we put in the paper. Sometimes you're like, that's not what I said. I mean, or sometimes you're missing things you're saying because your mind is put in like it's real, but you miss a couple of words that actually make the whole concept correct, and you missed it because you skipped them. But in your mind, I thought I put that in there, but you didn't. It happens.
Right.
The best of, again, it happens to me. I don't know, but if you're watching or listening, folks, it might happen to you. But you got to be aware. But I love what you said. Read it out loud, and read it to a point. Like, to your point, it's the same concept, same words can be perceived based on the tone.
Right.
Did I tell you to do that, or did I tell you to do that? I mean, it could be the same thing. We can use whatever phrase you want. If you use it at a different tone, it will be perceived differently because, to your point, it's not me. That person receiving, they're just having a bad day. And you're right. We all have those, right? And when you have one of those, everything seems to be negative. And the first thing that's going to irritate you, that's the person that's going to get the hit, which basically, I didn't mean to offend you, but now you're in trouble because you did it this way. Yeah. Well, so Erin, you said I do everything concisely. You just say that. So what is the advice to give our audiences if they want to write? How easy can they? What are some of the tips to really write precisely and concisely?
Yeah. And that is funny that I said that because I've had to work at it because I've always been a wordy writer. But as I've taught in the business setting, learning more and more, this stuff has to be tight and brief, right? So I've developed strategies that I share with students. And one of the best things you can do, which I also do, is when you have a wordy sentence, you don't have to go in and edit, like cross out tiny words and take a long time. You can actually just change the order of the ideas in your sentence, because any sentence will become more concise if you put who did the thing in the beginning. And then what did they do? So I always say front load meaning we want to put important stuff in the beginning because not everyone reads the whole thing. But to be concise in a sentence, just front load who and what, put them in the front. I could literally take like, it has been reported by the state of California that highways had all these accidents this year. Kind of like, I don't even want to listen to myself say it. If I put who did something in the front and what did they do, state of California reported highway accidents. We're done with the whole concept. So anytime, again, I was wordy too. Most people, probably 80% of people are wordier than they want. All you have to do is start changing your sentence order, put who did it and what did they do in the beginning, and watch the fluff words fall away. It's super easy. I have videos on it with examples. You can just do a couple empowering strategies that take like 5 minutes to learn and make all your sentences more concise just by leading with who and what.
Thank you. One thing you mentioned, Erin, that's important is the concept of like when you were writing to your client and you kind of figured out like, well, there's a whole 2/3 or 1/3 is gone, right? After you reviewed it. Well, what I wanted to ask is this: people sometimes write with feelings. And so they're like expressing their own feelings as opposed to like, I'm sending you a message, but I'm like also sharing my whole view and thinks about it. Does that even matter? I mean, really, it's if I'm sending you, I want this 1, 2, 3 things, or I want to share with you 1, 2, 3 things. You don't care about my feelings or what I think. You just care about give me the bottom line or the items in there. Now, if you request that from me, maybe you'll tell me, give me some examples. I'll throw those in. But sometimes we do it by we're overdoing, as you gave that example of that first person that was in leadership. I just wanted to impress and do more. But sometimes you don't want to do that, right? So how do you tackle that how can people really easily manage that?
Well, yeah, because typically almost any of us probably should say yes than we're planning to in most emails, right? Because of the whole thing where people aren't reading very much right now. And so I think whether it's feelings or other things, we have to really gauge, is this for them or for me? And so back to going through, because when you were talking about, and I've done it too, where it's like you want to explain, I really like this, I care about this, I'm so pumped. But is that now, later, or never information? Probably it's never information. And it's not because your reader doesn't care about you. It's just that the reader is walking into this message looking for something else potentially than what's on our mind. And so we want to always order things to what's relevant for them. Like if I write a paper on extreme weather for people around here in Northern California, wildfires are going to be at the top of my report. But if I revise it and I send it to people in Florida, I'm now going to put hurricanes and floods at the top, right? I'm always going to be thinking, what would be the best thing for my reader? And then after that, I'm just going to leave it out. And that's, so there's two levels of concision to consider. One is the holistic. How much stuff do you say in your message? And then the other is the sentence level. Are we using wordy words, or are we just getting right to the message by leading with who and what and keeping the sentences tight also? So we want to do both in a perfect situation.
Thank you. By the way, when you earlier spoke about the IT example where they were too technical, that's another thing I think that's worth highlighting quickly is that everybody's got strengths, and sometimes you have skills and your writing could be the best. And, you could be a doctor or some sort of, background where you really have expansive, vocabulary, but, most of the people will not understand it. I mean, you have to like bring it down to the level where it's simplified. Right. So I just wanted to highlight that. And the other one is, we're in a sensitive world. We, especially in the workplace, there's a lot of rules and policies and laws. One word can really be detrimental to the whoever writing or the company, right? And if there's a risk to the company, then you're the first one that's gonna be in a bad place, right? So what are some of the things that in your expertise and your trainees that you tell your clients to avoid using in any form of writing? Because here's the thing: if there's the saying that if it's not in writing, it never happened, and once it's written, you can't take it away. I mean, everything is documented now. You can't delete files, you can't delete emails. Everything you got a preservation order. Everything stays there, and all the attorneys, whatever lawsuit and things like that can reveal those things. So, what do you tell people that are watching and listening in the business world to avoid putting in writing? I mean, period.
Yeah, well, accusations and opinions, and anything that's not substantiated. So sometimes we end up writing in a way that's really more of a claim, like, hurricane is super helpful. It's a compliment, but because I said it sounds like my opinion. And so it's opinionated. And you brought that up earlier, like how much of my feelings do I include? When we're not asked for our feelings, typically we don't in business, right? We want to stay objective. So I would be careful about any kind of subjectivity where you're saying like, this is bad because I don't like X and Y, or I feel really insulted, but let's go forward anyway. These are the kind of things where we can look back later and feel a little embarrassed that that's part of the record. So before I hit send on things when I'm upset, I try to make sure that nothing in there was personal, or used words like we talked about, like you, and words like should, words that can put people on the defensive. And so just kind of checking it that way before it goes out.
Now, I have a question. I mean, well, not a question. It's really just a comment, and you probably can give me some feedback on that. For people, I mean, now you get company computers for the most part remotely. That's been the standard for the last few years. We also have the use of phones and things like that. So I would say to people, do not write, to anyone, text or anything in the corporate world, that personal stuff, because it is part of the company's legacy. And so whatever you say on a personal note is still going to be there if there's any type of challenges or situation or legal things. I mean, that just my take, and because I've seen that happen in the past. You're obviously, you do this for a living and you can see these things. Have you seen, by the way, anything of that actually was detrimental?
Oh, let's see. Yes, definitely. Because the problem is when we're reading something, we're always interpreting it. And then since we can save it, we can reinterpret again and again and again. For example, even something as simple as an email that just says, are we on at 5? And doesn't say, hi, Erin, are we on at 5 or whatever it is. I mean, I personally, it doesn't bother me too much, but people will tell me, why didn't they say my name? Why didn't they say hi? And now they're going to stress about that, right? How much time are they going to waste stressing about it? And so I think what happens is people can start to try to read tone into something because it's written. And so that's kind of back to that reading it aloud in a snarky voice idea.
Well, again, to be honest with you, I mean, if you don't, it's not work. Don't put it in writing. That's it. Keep it to yourself. Use your personal phone. But again, I mean, it happens, and we all kind of make mistakes, and so today's show is just to share with us some proper ways to communicate accurately, concisely, strategically, know your audiences, leave the fluff out, that kind of thing. Review your stuff before you actually send it out. So that's quite a bit there. Now let's talk about your book. That's the book, right?
Yeah, the book, my favorite thing about the book is that's how small it is. I specifically thought this needs to be concise because it's about writing concisely, which is what we all need right now. I wrote the book because my business students asked for it. They said, how do I practice these concepts? And I thought, well, most books are really long. Let me write a short one. And so the book includes a lot of the topics we've covered: how to be concise, how to be thoughtful, how to make writing easier, quicker, and more considerate. And so it's full of examples, before and after scenarios, and then the strategies for how to actually do it yourself as well.
I mean, again, I love it. This is you're not just talking, you're walking. You're literally practicing exactly what you preach. I mean,
Right.
The book is direct to the point. It's simple. It gives you all the stuff. It's easy to read, as opposed to you get lost in, the different things. It's not repetitive, because to get bigger books, you're just going to have to do a lot more, expanding or expensive, I guess, essay stuff, right? You don't want that. You want it just straight to the point with the right things. And I love that. And now it's really highlighting the strategies and really the best way to write. It's simple.
Yeah.
I'll personally, just by I haven't read the book, but talking about right now, I think it should be in every leader's, arsenal, and any manager or anybody with the role of leadership should have the ability to have this. Any HR or like learning development should have that as a tool to assist, in terms of. I actually use books, in trainings as well. Like, you give them some, books to go to. Depends on the department and what they do, but definitely, this is definitely a book that I would recommend myself, to my crews, as I have an opportunity to do so, for them to learn better, and just really just to do it for themselves. Now, by the way, you obviously come to training, so that's another opportunity. So everybody watching and listening, if you're having a phase or you're having a challenge with your team, communicating, or, whatever level that is. I mean, from a CEO down, we all have teams in a way, and, or you are part of the team too. You can also recommend, right? That's the other thing. I mean, it's not a downhill. It's everybody works equal. And yes, communication can work. I mean, if I feel sometimes that somebody in the company may not be doing, I can recommend, hey, listen, how about this book? Maybe we can all have a nice little session and talk about it.
I know. Yeah, it's not passive aggressive to buy this as a present for someone. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's what people will do is they'll say, the most often I'll hear from a manager who says, I just bought 5 copies so that me and my team could read them together. And then they talk, oh, how might we apply this chapter when we're dealing with customers or whatever it is? Yeah.
Well, part of, again, you mentioned empowerment, teaching and really educating, aligning, this is all part of it. I mean, as a team, we all can learn from each other. And like a book like this, we'll put these things on the table and people will come forward, like, hey, listen, I felt that way actually. And now you wouldn't even know that it happened unless that discussion was happening. And like, oh my goodness, poof. Now finally you realize like, oh, it can happen. Yeah,
you'll learn about even yourself by talking with your team about what writing. I mean, the best thing to do really is just to hear from our teams of what works for them and what doesn't. So the book facilitates that conversation. You're right. And so do the YouTube videos where you can watch one and then talk with the team. Has this ever happened to you? Have you been hurt by writing? How could we be more concise, more EQ, whatever is the topic?
So, Erin, you want our audiences to go to the YouTube primarily. That's where everything is.
The YouTube is where everything is. What's cool about it is that you can obviously access it from anywhere at any time and then leave me a question. I answer comments pretty much every day. It's a pretty interactive, I call it like a global learning community, because a lot of people are around the world and it's free and that's helpful, right? Depending on where you're coming from. So leave me a comment, leave me a question, and I'll get back to you. And for folks working in a corporate setting in the US, I have a e-course, Strategic Writing for Leaders, that you can take on your own. And it's all me explaining things in videos and revisions and quizzes and items we go through together. And then it has a certificate at the end for leaders building their continuing ed, building their professional development.
Well, thank you, Erin. And now you're in the West Coast, but you
Yep.
do travel as needed if someone
I do.
wants to bring you over and to do trainings. I mean, and those vary. Like it could be a day, it could be a couple of hours. How does that work in
Exactly.
terms of programs?
Yeah, some groups will do a couple of hours. Some groups will do more like a speaking gig where I show up and everyone gets a book and I speak. Some groups will do a whole day with only 30 people who are really going to study. Or some groups will do like a half day with their leadership team or something like that. So I customize it to the client's need.
I'm gonna have you on speed dial there.
Yeah, good.
You never know when we're gonna need your advice. But certainly,
Yeah.
listen. I can tell you, in the last 30 years, I could have used you in a room with quite a few people, over time, including myself. Because to be honest with you, like you learn over the years, right? You develop
Right.
certain skills. But you don't have all that up front when you start. So this is an excellent, tool for people who are starting. But even if you're an expert in whatever you're doing in the corporate ladder, you should be able to always revisit these things and refresh and make sure that if not you, your teams are part of it and stand in. And it's only going to make them better. The communication will be better. The results will be much better. And the performance will
Right.
definitely be there. All right, Erin. Well, listen, any last words of wisdom to conclude our show today?
I guess I'll just conclude by saying, folks, there is not one correct way to write. Writing is always circumstantial and situational. So if someone says that's not the right way to do it, it's not really possible for that to be true. It'll be right or wrong for a given situation. So you're better off spending your time analyzing the situation and the true needs than worrying about grammar and the details. It's the situation is king, right, when it comes to writing, versus I heard this idea in class in 7th grade. Doesn't matter. What matters right now is the situation. So use your own sort of logic and presence of mind and you can figure it out independently.
You go. There you have it, folks. I mean, that's as clear as it gets. Well, Erin, it was a pleasure having you on the show
Likewise.
today. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely stay in touch. And so,
Yeah.
folks, there you go. Please do check out the YouTube channel. I will be actually there. I will
Check it
subscribe
out.
because
Yeah.
I can definitely use those videos, for myself and definitely share the wealth, to folks that are looking. And again, to your point, it's available. It's free. Why not? Right?
Why
I
not
mean,
check it
YouTube is
out?
such a great place to
I
get
learn
information.
everything there. You can learn how to fix things in your house or whatever. So we can learn to write there. Don't need school necessarily. No.
Experts are in there, right? And that's really what it
right.
is. And of course, the show is available, so there's a lot of nuggets here as well that you can take. I will share with you this. Please feel free to put it up there if you want. I don't know if you do your shows on YouTube as well, but it's yours to.
Clips. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll send you a copy of it, so it'll be yours to
Thank you.
dissect as you wish. Yeah. So that's about it, folks. So we'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic, new guest. Bye for now.
Thank you.